Welcome to episode 5 of Mutigairi, a bi-weekly podcast where we help you learn about your Agikuyu culture, history, and heritage in English and in a fun, light-hearted way. I'm Njeri, your anchor, and I'm here with Waiyaki Wagishaga, your cultural enthusiast who continues to immerse himself in learning the ways of our ancestors. So today, guys, we have a really special episode for you. I am so excited for you to indulge in all the deliciousness you're about to hear over the next few minutes. The reason it's special is for two reasons, right? So first, we have a special guest, and I'm going to introduce him in a bit, but let me tell you this. You will enjoy him. He is stupendous. He is impressive. And the second reason this is so special is because it's actually part 2 of one of our most popular episodes, which is the Agikuyu religion and spirituality before British rule. So sit back, grab a pen. I promise you're going to learn so much and get excited to dig in. So let me tell you what we're going to cover today. We're going to cover 3 major topics, and I think you're really going to enjoy the discussion. The first is the purpose of life of a Agikuyu. That is, what was the reason for our being? Why did we exist? And you will realize that the purpose for our existence was not only individual, but it was also communal. And let me tell you this, guys, you are going to love what you hear and you're going to feel so proud about your history and your heritage. The second thing that we're going to cover is what happens to you, to a soul, when you die. Where do you go? Do you go to the afterlife? Do you go to heaven or do you stay here on earth? I think what you will uncover here will surprise you and it will help you realize how dynamic our culture is. It was a beautiful culture that we inherited from our ancestors. And the third thing that we're going to cover is what you can do with all this information. Specifically, how can you honor your ancestors? We'll leave you with some practical tips. So be sure to pay attention all the way to the end because you will be engulfed in so much deliciousness that you will not want to miss a minute. All right, guys, so let me introduce you to our guest speaker today. And I'll tell you a little bit about King Iri, and then I'll give him the opportunity to introduce himself. Now, King Iri is a family man. He's a community leader, and he's even an elder of the Agikuyu Council of Elders, Kimacia. He's a Pan-Africanist, and he actually believes in going back to fetch the best of what we've lost, the best of the Agikuyu culture, and then making it a part of our dynamic future. He believes in integrating the best of our past with our current contemporary modern society. And I love that so much. So with that, King Iri, let me pass it on to you and tell you, give us a quick intro so our listeners know who you are.
Thank you very much, Njeri. And I don't know what else to add to that. You've squared it really well. My name is Iri wa Kanyi. For those who want to know my other credentials from a Kikuyu perspective, I am mo boy wa bare ya marigo. That means I am from the Wamboi leaf of the Agikuyu people. And further down, if you go down the route, down the tree, you will find that I come from a particular Bare, which is a sub-clan called Marigo. That means a lot for people who have been studying the culture. That means I am in that ruling class of Agikuyu who are Azamaki. Yeah, so I have some privileges as such. And one of the things that I do is I collect information from people who have carried it over for many generations. And I have the right as a Mudamaki of the boy of that particular clan to share that information with you. I'm excited to be here. And let's get into this and let's get to speak to the people and share what we have.
Okay, Waiyaki, so where do we start today?
So we're going to go back to episode 3, which is part 1 of Agikuyu religion and spirituality.
Okay.
And one of the things we want to discuss with Kinoti is about Iri and Iriri, and why it is important in the religious and spiritual context of the Agikuyu.
Okay.
Let's kick it off from there. Yes, you are very right, Waiyaki. Iri and Iriri are essential in life, and they translate in your position in the afterlife. But before we get into that, let's look at Iri and Iriri again for those who may need a refresher. What is Iri? Iri is strength, wealth, prosperity. In Agikuyu, in the Agikuyu language, that is hinya, otonga, na ogashiru. And they came in several forms.
Okay.
First, we have health and peace of mind. Second, we have wisdom and knowledge. And then we have spouses or a spouse. As you know, the Agikuyu are known to be, in the Agikuyu man was known to have more than one wife. And then you have children. And finally, animal, lands, and any other earthly possessions that you may have. So that really encompasses Iri. And when you look at Iriri, it translates to honor or legacy. And in Agikuyu, that's gumo. Somebody's gumo. This could even be seen or translated as individuals who had the right to inherit you. These were your Iriri as well. So really, it's all about legacy. And what's an interesting tidbit here is that, you could also look at it from a vice versa perspective. If your child was prosperous and had Iri, this child contributed to your own Iriri. They contributed to your legacy, your gumo. So there is a continuation. There's a continuation of Iri and Iriri within a family. So it's not just an individual's focus. It translates into the family. And that is why even later, even into the spiritual world, whatever gumo you had, whatever legacy you had, it does play a part in your future, in your spiritual realm or a spiritual engagement. Yes.
Okay, so I think I've heard you say before that, some of the greetings, that this was such an integral part of our culture, right? That even in our greetings, we would say things like, may Iri and Iriri love you. That was part of our everyday life because this was so important to who we were as the Agikuyu.
Absolutely. This was a daily focus, right? It is why you woke up in the morning. You had Iri and Iriri on your mind if you were someone who was forward-looking. And you're right, that particular greeting was, may Iri and Iriri love you, in fact. May Iri and Iriri love you. May you beget obedient children. That was a very typical blessing that people used to give one another. And that's the beauty of it. In contrast, people who did not have Iri and Iriri were really looked down upon. They would be called things like Morahu, which is gone with the wind. You were seen as a nobody, unfortunately. Your offensive nature, was temporary. And that's how they looked at it, One particular example of someone who was seen as Morahu or someone who did not have Iri and Iriri is Mwendwoniri. Mwendwoniri is someone, it directly translates to someone who has sold their machete or their sword. And so this individual was seen as useless. And what it meant, it was an individual who was married or was in a situation where they got themselves into a matrilineal marriage, meaning they had failed to pay ratio, and therefore the children being begot in this marriage were actually not called by his name. They're not his. So someone like that has no legacy because his children will not bear his name. That was an individual that was looked down upon.
An interesting thing is what people might not know about that is if you marry a woman who already has children and the father of her children had not paid dowry, those children become your children because you've paid the dowry. So today, if you marry a single woman who has a child, despite the fact that the child has a biological father, that child becomes yours because when you go through the rorashio process, you actually acquire the child.
Absolutely. And it was actually a blessing. People, women who had children out of wedlock or something like that, and they finally got married, the men who married them did not show favoritism between the children. They loved them all. These children ended up being called by his name, and he was in all ways spiritually and physically their father. That is perhaps a unique thing about Agikuyu culture.
I think that's so beautiful. And I think I'm taking a couple of things from this, right? Before we move on to any other bigger focus other than the individual focus. I'm taking on the fact that, the Agikuyu, our last discussion here is that if you had children out of wedlock, and I think it's so beautiful that if you ended up marrying somebody else, which includes today, and they pay rorashio on you, then they, in essence, have spiritually adopted your children, and your children belong to them. So I think if I was to bring this into the contemporary context, I think it's a beautiful thing. And if rorashio hasn't been paid, it's particularly maybe something for you to think about from that spiritual perspective. I think the second thing I took, which was also beautiful, go ahead, King Ori.
No, I was going to say you nailed that right on the head, and maybe that's a discussion for another podcast. But rorashio and that's loosely translated to bride price, but it's not the same thing. But we'll use that. We'll get away with that for today. But rorashio was a powerful way of tying together a family, and it was really a beautiful way of ensuring a family's health. Mentally and physically and spiritually and in all ways. But yes, go ahead, Njeri.
I think that's beautiful because sometimes we forget the value of the rorashio and we convert it into simple monetary transactions. And we nowadays sometimes think of it as buying a bride. But we need to start thinking about the deeper meaning of that. And this is starting to give us light into that. And the second thing, go ahead, Waiyaki.
And the whole rorashio topic is a whole nother topic, which you don't want us to talk about today because we can spend a few hours talking about it. So go ahead.
Okay, great. The second thing that I wanted to just kind of holistically capture the key things you brought in, which is Ire is strength, wealth, and prosperity, right? And Ireri is more your honor, your legacy, gumo, right? And that you wanted to live a life with Ire and Ireri because our life was not just a physical life, it actually continued into the afterlife. So those same blessings continued into the afterlife. I think that's beautiful. And guys, I think the next place I want us to go is really the question of the community focus, because the Ire and Ireri is more of an individual and a family focus, right? But I know we were more holistic than that. So when we think about the Agikuyu Waiyaki, what was perhaps more of a bigger community focus?
So that's a good question, Njeri. I think the community focus. So so for every Mogekuyu, when they start the priesthood in their house, it translates to the community. So if your homestead is holy, if you have men and women who are honorable, then the community, it starts at home. In fact, they say charity, that's actually a song or a saying that Kikuyu say. When it starts at the home, when you have Ire and Iriri at the home, then it permeates through the entire community. And from a religious perspective, we talked about in episode 3, where you have, the man as the priest of his house, and then there's, Mahoya Maitora, which is like the village, and then Mahoya Ma Rugogo, which is like the extended area community. So that started, anything that started at home permeated through the entire community.
Wonderful. Okay, great. Anything to add to that, King Ori, in terms of the communal focus of the Agikuyu?
Right. Whereas Iri and Iriri was something that the individual championed and the families championed. The moment they became communal in their nature, there is the third thing that they had in mind, and that is vayo, which is peace. Just about every communal action was actually designed to ensure peace and well-being, which is what we call ohoro. Ohoro. Ohoro does not mean news. It means ohoro as in kohora, which means to be cool. So, every morning an elder prayed on behalf of his household, and he asked that Mwenenyaga, God, Gai, grants his family well-being, which is ohoro. And everywhere you went, anyone you met, the first thing you ask them is ohoro waku, meaning, how is your peace? How is your calmness? This was another major thing in the community, which was to always ensure that there was peace. So the first responsibility was of an individual was to deliberately restrain any malicious or envious attitudes and feelings towards those who he may have perceived as wealthier or more elite in personality or any other perception that they may have. Your first responsibility was also to restrain that malice that may be coming up in order to maintain peace, ohoro. Yeah, absolutely. This was a major piece of the community, and it plugs in very well with justice and peace, justice and pursuit of some kind of equality and calmness in the community, especially when ohoro or peace had been disrupted, because we are known, as humans, we will disrupt that peace. So that is now becomes the second focus of any community banding, was to always make sure that you have peace. It is that peace issue has permeated every single communal arrangement. This is really the focus of even the community, the Council of Elders. This is their focus, is to maintain peace through justice.
Oh, that's so wonderful, right? And when you bring it into perspective, it shows you the beauty, right, of our culture, which is everything. And when you say that it permeated the community, I see it even in the words, like you said, Tugaga ohoro waku, we say ohoro waku. Until today, I never realized the significance of that word, of that greeting. I just thought it was like a what's up, right? Without really deep understanding and meaning of the word. The same way we sometimes hear others say namaste, right? Which we understand means the spirit in me honors the spirit in you, right? It's about honor and it brings about peace. And even in our own culture, down to even the greeting that we had, we were focused on your peace. And from now on, I'll tell you this, guys, when I say ohoro waku, it will come with a different depth than I knew before. So thank you for that integral piece of information, because now I want to move us on to the next piece, which has to do with questions. We had so many questions on this one, guys. And I want both of you to chime in, which had to do with the afterlife, like what happens when you die. People really wanted to know more about this. They wanted us to go deeper. So one of you pick up and go, what happened when you died as a Agîkûyû?
So I'll let Kinoti talk about what happened when you die, but the death. So the ceremonies that happen after death as a topic for another day. But yeah, Kinoti, so we're not going to talk about what happens when someone dies physically, like they're being buried tomorrow. We're not talking about that.
Okay.
We're talking really from a spiritual perspective.
Yeah.
Where do you go when you die?
Okay.
So Kinoti, go ahead.
All right. So we've talked about peace, and that peace, especially in the community, your actions toward contribution towards that peace or disruption of it had a very direct connection with your status in the afterlife. But let me first answer the question.
Okay.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The question straight out the bat, where do you go when you die, really, Mugikoyo did not believe that you really died. Mugikoyo believed that you went to sleep and that your soul, or Gomi, went and traveled into a new realm called Werua Mukaga. I don't know if you've heard about that one before, Njeri. Werua Mukaga.
Just don't ask me to pronounce it and we're good.
I don't think she's heard of it.
I have. Tell us more.
Yeah, so, and before we talk about Werua Mukaga, I want to introduce some concepts because they're important in tying this all together. The first one is the equally important question of where did we come from before we were born?
Okay.
Right? I think we don't talk about that, especially in the Abrahamic faith, right? Mm-hmm. I don't hear that being a concern. We're always talking about where are we going. But Mugikoyo was also concerned about where you came from. So you will see concepts where, when an infant is born, they believe that he's actually also traveling. He or she, that infant, is traveling from another realm coming into this physical realm. And that an infant was obviously a mix of spiritual and physical entities. And how we see that coming across very clearly is in the second ritual after birth that was called the second birth. That happened around anywhere from year 4 to year 10, depending on different communities of Kikuyu.
Which is the Goshokia Mwanaihuine ceremony.
Goshokia Mwanaihuine, yes, or Goshiara Mwanariakere, or Goshiara Mwanaraburi. All those mean being born again. Mm-hmm. And it was a very elaborate ceremony. And what happened during this time, this was when a child was seen as being born physically, or that they had transitioned fully to becoming a physical individual and part of the community fully. Before then, they had this, quasi or pseudo spiritual tag to them, and they were seen as still transitioning to become a full member of the community. Yeah. And what we see is, during that time now, they're seen as having fully arrived and recognized during that particular igogona or ceremony. Mm-hmm. There's also the concept of rebirth. If a child had died prior to being born the second birth, that child was going to be born again if the mother got pregnant, right? Meaning that child, there's a concept of rebirth. That soul never quite made it. So when the child died at maybe age 1 as an infant or something, that now if the mother gets pregnant again, it is the same soul that's trying to come back. Wow. So that's why you would hear names. Yes, that's why you'd hear names like Joki,
Morioki.
Morioki. Exactly, Morioki. These were names that meant that someone is coming back again, or making another trial back into the physical world, meaning they weren't quite there the first time.
Oh, so my gosh.
Interesting. Yeah, you can see that there's to them.
Beautiful.
Yeah, to Mugikoyo, you can see there's a full continuation in their understanding. It's not just I'm born and then I transition.
Yeah, another thing I would like to say, about the rebirth or Goshiara Mwana Reakere, people might think that we were brought baptism by, Christianity, but we had our own baptism. That was our baptism. And that's why you will hear, like in our parents' generation, they have alternate names. Like my dad's name is Geshanga, but he's also called Getau, because that's the name you're given after that ceremony. And actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Kingori, if a child died before that ceremony happened, there wasn't a big mourning process, as if because a child didn't have their own, they didn't have their own spiritual being. It was like the child was an extension of the mother.
Yeah.
Yes, they were seen as still as part of the mother. And you're right. those, whenever that happened, the community did not make it out to be a very big problem. They saw it as that the individual will be back. So the mourning was not that massive. You are very right about that.
And that's because, like you said before, we didn't die according to the Agikuyu. We went into the afterlife. So your soul was just going to come back to another child, correct?
Exactly.
Yeah. Let me add something to that as well. So when you say when we say we don't die, it's because, okay, so if you have children, you name them, and part of your soul passes to them, right? So you name your parents, you name your parents. So your parents might be gone physically, but they're still alive, right? But then there's a difference between, there's people who we say, like what King Ori said as Mwendwoniri or Mwendwoniri, maybe somebody who didn't do anything in this life. When that person passes, and King Ori, we've had this conversation offline, it's like when their memory does not exist, it's now they die. They become what we call mokui.
I see.
So I just wanted to add that to that conversation, King Ori.
Absolutely. Yes. And you've touched on two very important points. The first one was the second concept that I was actually going to introduce, which is of keruru or shieruru.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Good segue.
and right, you did. And the beautiful thing here is with shieruru or keruru, the best way to look at it is Agikuyu believes that whereas a human has gomi or goma, and we will talk about that, what the difference is, if there is any. Any other animate object, a tree, an animal, they had a segment called a keruru within them. This is kind of like, the way we might look at it today is it's what carries the legacy of that particular organism. Maybe it's the mind, if I had to give it a correlated meaning in our understanding today. So whereas a human being had all three, a human being had their body, they had the keruru, and they had their goma, the soul. But all other animals and plants were seen to only have the body, which is what we see, and the keruru, which was another segment of their unseen being.
And we want to define the keruru as loosely as the shadow. It's like keruru. The direct translation of keruru, for those who don't know, is shadow.
It's shadow, right. And the reason why they call it shadow is because from the afterlife, the keruru is visible, and we'll talk about that a little bit. And so, but to loosely put it in a way that our listeners can see it, there are three distinct beings or parts of the same being when in the part of a particular human in particular. I know we're getting a little bit deep, so let me pull back a little bit, and maybe some of these things will be answered as we go into it.
I think this is so fantastic, and I'm going to pull us along, but I think something so beautiful that you brought out here, King Ori, is the fact that we saw our souls as a continuation, right? And you just gave us the example of, the rebirth that every child actually went through, and that the soul always continued, right? I love the fact that you told us that when a person passed away, their soul went to Werua Mokaga, right? And I may have mispronounced that a little bit. But I think that is so beautiful to understand that that's where we went, and that and the thing I want to say here, the biggest thing for me here that I caught, which is so beautiful, is the complexity and the intelligence of those that came before us. The fact that today we are thinking of our ancestors, we're speaking of the fact that within us, we have three pieces. We have our physical body, right? We have our mind, our shadow, our keruru, and we have our soul, goma. And those three, I are so well aligned with what we call spirituality today and the definitions that we give, right? That it continues to blow my mind how deep and rich our culture is, and that we don't always recognize it. So these conversations, thank you, gentlemen, continue to instill so much pride in me in terms of our history and the pieces of our history that we need to continue to collect. So let me move us forward by talking about moving us to the next question, which is the spiritual existence of Agikuyu. So what happened again? What happened to your spirit or your soul when you passed away? You went to Werua Mokara, and then what?
Right. So I'm going to talk about both. It's obvious what happens to the body, so we'll not touch on that. We'll talk about both the soul, which is in this case our Goma or Gomi, and we'll talk about the Shieruru. Waiyaki had mentioned that whenever an individual was named after, so if you have a grandfather whom you're named after, for example, that somehow you lived through them. So I just wanted to clarify that. What was seen to live through this individual was not necessarily their Goma or their Gomi, not their soul, but shards of their personality, which is what we're calling Shieruru. These are those things about that person that continue to live on, that legacy of that individual that continue to live on. So it doesn't completely translate to mind the way we see it today. But if you had a way to imagine, if you could fragment your mind and a little bit of your mind was passed on to your children or your grandchildren or anybody who was named after you, and that you continue to influence them in a way, but not spiritually, more intellectually and so on and so forth. That was the concept that Agikuyu had about this particular concept of Shieruru, especially when it came to individuals or people. Now, when you talk about the soul, it was a lot more clearer to Agikuyu.
Got it. Before we go there, can I please, let me interrupt you, King Ori, before we go there. By the way, I think this whole thing of fragments of your personality being in you is so beautiful. So what you're telling me is that there are fragments of my show that I was named after in me. And I think that is beautiful and everything I would want it to be. But before you go into the soul, Goma, Gomi, you defined both of those. I really have to bring up a question because we got a lot of comments and questions and feedback about this. Today, because we have to clarify this before we talk about the soul. Today, we think of the devil as Goma, don't we? So how are you juxtaposing that with the soul? I'm a little bit confused, guys.
I knew this was coming. Waiyaki, do you want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, I will. So, the different churches that existed during colonization. So the Roman Catholic Church, the Anglican Church, which is the Church of England, and the PCEA, which is the Church of Scotland. So they, in trying to convert the Kenyans in general, but we're talking about Agikuyu in particular, from their traditional religion, they had to use tactics, right? So they would say that Goma is those people you're praying to are Satan,
a devilish.
Yeah, and the Agikuyu didn't really believe in Satan. That was not part of our culture or our definition. And even the word Satan, or what Agikuyu call Shaitani. Shaitani is not a Kikuyu word. It comes from Satan, which is translated in Swahili, which I don't even think the cultural Swahili had the word Satan.
Right.
So they called it Shetani, right? So it was really trying to remove the Agikuyu from their strength, which their strength was our culture, our what we believed in, our ways of life, our odoire,
our core.
Our core. That's our strength. When you remove somebody from their core strength, then you can subjugate them.
Yeah.
And that's really what happened. So what they did is they made people believe that Goma is Shaitani. And then here's an interesting fact. So, I was born Catholic. And Catholics, what do? They honor saints.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They do St. Paul, St. John Bosco, St. Vincent, all the saints who have gone
Before them.
So how is it that you can call our ancestors Satan, but then you honor your saints in your religion? So it's interesting. But that's the reason why, and Kingori you may add something to this as we move along, but that's the core of how they demonized us honoring our ancestors, because every ceremony we did involved honoring our ancestors and appeasing them and making sure that we did what they wanted.
Yeah, they were such an integral part of our culture.
Absolutely.
Right. And, on the first part of what Waiyaki talks about, I'm going to read a little bit of something here from what is commonly known as the Barlow Papers. This is from the Church of Scotland Mission in Kenya that started in 1888, I believe, or something like that, or I think soon after that. And this is writings by Arthur Russell Barlow, who wrote these papers that made the rounds all over Britain and helped to set the pace for how these people viewed us coming into evangelizers. Well, he says, Agikuyu have no obligation to love and help all men as taught by Christ. They are self-seeking and self-loving. No self-denial and self-sacrifice is found among them. They have no compassion over the blind and the dumb and the crippled. They fear death, making them to throw the dead in the bush. They are slaves to superstitious fear of death. Lahu, taboo, rogi, witchcraft, evil eye, etc. They have no philosophy of life yet formulated. They are ignorant of purpose of life, no explanation of birth, life, toil, disease, sorrow, death, etc. So their view of life is limited to earthly existence and have no thought of future reward and punishment and the resurrection.
Kingori.
This
Go ahead.
is the viewpoint shared prior to the exodus or the mass movement to come and evangelize us. This is what most people who left Britain to come and evangelize us had thought about this. This is what their anthropologists told them. And so later on, you'll see a lot better information coming and there are better observations coming, but this is what set the stage. And so you're wondering why they would have heard someone say Goma and quickly, imagine we were talking about some devil. Yeah, and what they did is they took the liberty and said, let's help these guys sort their mess out, and because they're obviously a devilish, superstitious people, we will just help them. Let's divorce them from their ancestors, right? By telling them that what they're talking about are not really ancestors, but demons and devils. And so they literally and deliberately took the word Goma, which was a beautiful word, which meant our departed ancestors, people who had gone to coma or coma, to sleep. They took that word and they turned it into devil, demons, and whatever other thing that was in their liturgy, as Waiyaki stated. This is really how it began.
Yeah, and let me just kind of close out on this topic by saying, when I heard what you read, and I contrasted it with what Waiyaki read at the end of episode 3, Agikuyu, Religion and Spirituality. Guys, it broke my heart. And also, we all know just by reading this that this is not the truth about our ancestors, because it's not the truth of who we are. Now, we can't go back and change it. But what we do have is we have an obligation to correct the legacy of our ancestors. And I think what it is that when you know better, you do better, right? So
Absolutely.
I've used the word Goma in the past to mean devil. But now I know that my Goma, in the true intention of our culture and our history and our legacy, are my ancestors. And I just cannot continue to connect my ancestors with the devil. I cannot do that disservice to them. So I have to tell you, this has made me a little bit emotional, just understanding the depth of it and the history of it. But when we know better, we do better, and we have an obligation to do better. So I think this is a good time to turn it back to you, King Ori, and move on to the point around, our soul. Then tell us more about Goma Gomi. What happened to the soul?
Right. So to put another final point, we typically use the term Gomi to sidestep that landmine, that mind problem we have, since we already have an association of those other things.
Okay.
That's why people say Gomi and instead of Goma, because they understand it's a problem for a lot of people. So you will hear that term used interchangeably. It's the same thing.
Okay.
So yes, what happened to the Gomi? The Gomi was said to go through this tree's roots. Why a tree? We'll talk about that. This tree was called Mukongoe, Miria Mukongoe, the roots of a Mukongoe tree, which is interesting because if you ask anyone to show you what a Mukongoe tree is, they usually will have a very hard time doing that. So we think it was a mythical tree that was more said to signify a portal, right? And so it was seen that you went into the Weroa Mokaga through this portal of some kind of root system, and once you got there, it was a beautiful green plain. Wero means grassland. Mokaga means green. It is a beautiful green grassland. It was said to not lack any sun and not lack any rain. So it's an interesting place that was just perfect. It was peaceful and it was very calm. And
let me add something there, just to interrupt. Sorry to interrupt you, King Ori. And that's why when someone dies, we say "Aro mama," kumama is to sleep. "Aro mama kwega kuraga." Actually, that is referring to where the soul goes when they pass on. Go ahead, King Ori.
Beautiful.
Absolutely. And I'm going to read you another excerpt from a more recent writing. The first African governor of the Central Bank of Kenya, a gentleman by the name of Dan Kandegwa, wrote in his memoirs, and this is the book, you can go look it up. It's called Walking in Kenyatta's Struggles, My Story. And he was giving, he was talking about some description he was given by Jomo Kenyatta himself, at a time when he used to fall in and out of comas regularly just before his death in 1978. And so it reads, one day, Kenyatta suffered a blackout at his Mombasa Tiririka residence and remained in a coma for 3 days. There were 3 days. There were 3 days of uncertainty, and when he came out of it, I was among the first people to visit him, wrote Ndegwa. I asked him, what happened? He replied that he had visited what he called Weroa Mukaga, an expansive plain where he was all alone. And Kenyatta recalled that one could not see the end of that serene plain, where he had been at complete peace and where the sun never set. So that's a recent example of, I guess recent enough example of someone making a claim of having been there and then coming back to life to talk about it. And therefore, and after this, apparently Kenyatta said that he knew that, soon enough he will be going there and not coming back.
Okay.
So that's an example that we have today that we can lean on from a more recent perspective. And other people, I'm sure, have given that kind of feedback. So this is to tie that around. Wero Amokaga is really another dimension. The most interesting thing that we have come to collect and understand is that it is also this very realm in terms of it. When you're in the Wero Amokaga, the same trees that you were seeing when you were alive are the same trees you're going to see there.
Oh.
This is absolutely the same animal that you left alive. It is going to be alive when you go to Wero Amokaga. How is that possible? This is where the concept of Shiruru comes in. In fact, you are able to interact with your children. You're able to interact with other members of the community of whom you had some connections with while you were alive. This is what made the life of Ngomi very interesting. Once in Wero Amokaga, is that you could still interact with elements of this current realm and probably even go and get into some mischief around that.
I love that. And I mean, I think it ties so beautifully to what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast, which is the fact that we believe that there was a continuation between the physical life and the afterlife, right? And that's why it was so important to have Ire na Iriri in your physical life, because now you brought it together for us. You took it into the afterlife. You took it to Wero Amokaga. So I think that's so beautiful.
Absolutely.
But let me ask you, talking about mischief, right? Did we believe in bad spirits and good spirits, or rather bad ancestors and good ancestors? Like people that came and spooked you and brought negative versus those that brought positive into your life?
Yes, that's exactly what happened. So these individuals, so the Agikuyu used to be very suspicious about Ngomi, because Ngomi were people, and now they've been they've been separated from their physical element, and they're now at their purest form. So if the Ngomi was an individual who was kind of a troublemaker while alive, you were to expect the same now that they've passed on. And if they were an individual that was good and and had done great things in life, you were to expect that they will continue to do some of the same things while they had passed on to the next realm. So yes, we had good spirits and bad spirits, and even some diseases, some mischief, some calamities, death of animals and things like that were attributed to those bad ancestors who had passed on and were looking to exert some sort of revenge or something like that is connected to when they were alive. So what are we talking about? This is where we're talking about peace and justice in this realm, and why it's important, why your ireri is important, your honor is important in this life. People who had lived through life and had gone through all the steps of their of their lives, having attained the right, igogona or magogona, which is ceremonies, were seen to be ordained. And on top of that, if they attained Iri and Iriri, they set themselves apart. Now, if those same individuals avoided what we call zahu, which is taboos, or
right?
megiro, which is things that they have been asked not to do,
forbidden,
right?
Yeah.
So, forbidden things. Let me give you an example of megiro. If we have a deceased ancestor, and they said, make sure you don't cut that particular tree. Something as simple as that. But they left what we call morabo. They said it. And you do it. That is mogiro that you have broken. Or they said, you may never marry into a daughter from that family. And you do that. Those were megiro. And they went on and on and on into even more complex and more things that we readily today see as sin, right? They went into those those are the things.
But I should also add... I should also add, because Waiyaki has mentioned this a few times, in the Agikuyu community, everything could be resolved. So just because something happened doesn't mean that there was no resolution, right, that existed within our culture.
Yeah, and that's why King Ori said that... Sorry, King Ori. That's why King Ori said that Thayo was the ultimate aim with, using justice, kehonia, kehoto, that was the aim. So any situation could be resolved by traditional processes, ceremonies. And like we said in a previous podcast, when you did something bad to another Mogikoyo, there was no "I'm sorry." There had to be a process of making them whole.
Yeah.
So absolutely.
Another thing I'll add on the bad spirits versus good spirits, there's actually a saying that says, I don't know if I'm saying it correctly, but Goma neire kionohu, meaning that, they can still, even if they are gone, they still have an influence. And, if not treated properly, can be harmful.
Okay,
this
guys.
This is very true. This is very true.
I think this...
And Njeri, I wanted to add one more thing.
Okay.
When you saw elders sitting under a tree endlessly, and this is one of those things that Westerners observed and came to think that, especially male elders, that men were sitting under a tree constantly debating. They saw that as some form of laziness, that they did not want to go work. What they did not understand is they were at a court. And every single time you saw men sitting under a tree debating, it was because they were resolving these problems within the communities that had disrupted the peace. This is why every problem had a solution. It's because a court could be put together very quickly to address issues. And we're talking about full resolution, peace, justice, and reconciliation. These were the three things that were used to fully resolve issues and to make sure that everyone felt that they were no longer aggrieved. But whenever a soul failed to achieve these things while they were alive here on this earth, and went into the next realm, carrying that baggage, having a heavy soul, full of those things that they stole and never really said that they did, and never had an opportunity to resolve it, and all these other things. These were the things that made them restless. These gomas that have shionohu, as Waiyaki was saying, they have some negativity within them. They're vibrating negatively. Or have low vibrations. These were the ones that were troublemakers. The ones that were not troublemakers would be seen as Moraika Mureri, a guardian angel. So they were out to look out for their families and out to protect their family. So that was the difference between the two types of Goma. Or it's same Goma, it's your ancestor, but why they were seen as causing mischief versus probably protecting or looking out for you.
So beautiful, King Ori. And I'm going to say this one thing and then move us on to the final question, right? Which is, I just think just what you just explained here continues to express the richness of our culture. So think about this. I mean, for me, it's so profound. The message was, in order for you to continue and have Iri and Iriri in the afterlife, anytime anything happened, you needed to seek resolution, which meant three things, which meant peace as defined through peace, justice, and reconciliation. And the fact that there were constant debates by the elders in terms of how to reconcile these things tells me that our culture was so dynamic and flexible, which is something else, which is amazing because rigid cultures don't last. Dynamic cultures grow and last and adapt to the times. And I think that that is so beautiful. So thank you for sharing that, King Ori. I'm going to take us, gentlemen, to the last question. And I want to hear from you guys, which is, now that we've shared all this amazing information with our listeners, the question is, what do you do about it? I know we already talked about the Rorashio, which we'll talk about in another podcast in much more detail, but how then do you honor your ancestors when you recognize that they're here with us, that their souls are ever present, right? And our souls will be ever present. Then the question becomes, what do we do with it? How do we honor our ancestors?
So,
right.
Go ahead, Kimari.
As important as ancestors are, and we'll talk about that question, I wanted to mention something very quickly before we answer that question. The Mogekoyo, of course, is a very spiritual person. But more important than the ancestors was God, Gai. Mogekoyo attributed all good things to Gai. And he saw Gai as this benevolent father figure. Gai Fafa is an old attribute of Gai. He gave everything. He shared everything that we have. Everything that we have is because of him. And we saw Gai. We used to say Gai Dare hair. Dare hair, meaning has no horns. Meaning God did not have that kind of temperament that would be vengeful. He is all merciful, and Gai was good all the time. This is the view that Amoreko has about God. So when you see Amoreko not focusing or seemingly not focusing on Gai when it comes to matters of whenever there are troubles, it is because he did not attribute those things to Gai. These problems were problems that other ancestors were bringing upon him. But the overall solution, whenever you were unable to provide a solution, they always went back to God. Yes. And this is where you have the idea of praying in the morning every day over your family for protection. There was the idea of whenever there were massive things that you did not think that the devils had, the Goma had anything to do with, you went to God. This was rain. This was a failed crop. This was a massive, mysterious pandemic like we're going through right now. These are all matters that would take Amoekoyo straight to the altar to pray directly to God, and he did not need any filters. God was always listening.
I think that's, if I can just add, I think that's such a beautiful hierarchy, right? At the top is always God. It's always God. God is benevolent. God is all-loving. God is generous, is kind, is all these positive things. So at the top of the hierarchy is God. So beautiful. So now then below is ancestors, right? Not at the same level as God.
Right.
So then the question becomes how much like the Catholics honor the saints, right? How do we honor, or how do we honor our ancestors? How do we make this information more practical?
Yeah, let me take this one before King Ori closes on this topic. So, if you look at the Agikuyu community today, we have very many issues that start at home, right? So you have the social fabric or the behavior fabric of our culture has sort of been degraded, which brings so many things, domestic violence, separations. So a lot of the problems we go through today are because we haven't honored the traditions which connect us with our ancestors. So, for example, like King Ori said, Mwendwoniri, somebody who hasn't paid dowry but has lived with their wife for 10 years or 20 years, right? Or, you haven't gone through the proper rites at each stage of your life where you, especially the marriage rites, and we're going to talk about this in another podcast or several podcasts, when you don't properly do that process, where instead of bringing goats, you bring money, or you don't bring muratina, you make it trivial. And so now here you have two families, say a man and a woman, coming together. And then when you don't do that process correctly, you have two battles now, basically, that you're fighting with ancestors from both families, which cause so many issues which we can't even talk about here. But basically, to honor your ancestors is, first of all, remember them, always think about them, and follow your family traditions. And if you have any debts that you need to pay, those debts have to be paid. If your grandmother's rorashio was never paid, it needs to be paid because it comes to haunt you in the future. And in fact, the Bible says, I don't know if it's in Isaiah, I'm not sure which book, but it says, we have our forefathers sinned and now we are suffering because of it. The Bible itself says that, So to honor your ancestors is to make sure that you keep the traditions that you have and make sure that whatever is needed, you fulfill. I think that's how you honor your ancestors.
That's so beautiful, because if you don't fulfill those things, then you're breaking the continuation of life.
That's right.
Wonderful. Kengori, any final thoughts in terms of how to honor our ancestors?
Waiyaki nailed it. It's about, living your life the way they would have wanted you to live your life. Honor God is number one. And number two, live a good life. Seek out Iri and Iriri. Avoid Mehiro and Rahu. Those are the things that give a good name to your ancestors. And of course, that last one that you mentioned, complete any contractual obligations that they may have had and they may have not fulfilled. Those are the most common ones being those around rorashio. It's a very beautiful topic and very important. So I'm sure this is something that will be touched on in another episode. But it would be very unfortunate where you are just enjoying the Ire and Iriri left for you, but you decide that for some reason, any debts to be covered are not your responsibility. That would be atrocious.
There are no better words to say to close this podcast, except what the two of you have said. But I'm going to say that this episode really touched me deeply, emotionally, and even challenged me mentally. So I really want to thank you, Waiyaki, for your input. But I really want to give a big thank you to our guest here, Kengori wa Kanyi. And I can tell you, your insight was spotless. It was immaculate. It was clearly well researched. You know what you're talking about. And we're so honored that you took the time to share what you know with our listeners. Thank you so much, Kengori. We feel obligated to you, and we are so grateful for your time and your insight today. It was fantastic. And now...
The honor was mine.
Thank you. Now, before we close the podcast as usual, Waiyaki, let me ask you a question. Are you ready for the question?
Absolutely.
Okay, so then what are we going to talk about in the next episode?
So the next episode, we've had a lot of, since we started the podcast, we've had a lot of interactions with our listeners. And in fact, that's how we met Kengori on Instagram. We've had so many questions that have come. So we're going to do a podcast or an episode where we compile some of the questions that have been asked and answer them in a logical order.
Great. So if people have additional questions, where should they send them to?
Post them on our Facebook page, our Instagram, or send an email to matire.gemi@gmail.com.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you to our listeners. We've had such a great time. Thank you again, Kengori. You are fantastic. And we want you back already, right? And thank you as always, Waiyaki. See you later. Thank you for listening and being present here with us today. We are grateful. You can find Matire Gemi on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to follow us. Our website is matire-gemi@simplecast.com. And this podcast was produced by Waiyaki and Njeri Wadiho with sound design by Njengan Gigs. Thanks again, and please share this widely.